Chances are you or someone you know has had a doctor say three of the most frightening words possible. You have cancer. Detroit area oncologist Dr. Farid Fata said those very words to hundreds of his patients. He then started many of them on chemotherapy treatment to fight it. But it turns out most of them were battling something that never existed. Dr. Fata was purposely misdiagnosing hundreds of patients, causing serious injury, even deaths, in what's being called one of the largest criminal healthcare frauds in American history. Now, as doctors, we take an oath to do no harm. So to me, this story is unthinkable.
The doctor that I trusted my life with would forever change my view of the word doctor, who takes an oath to do no harm.
I did encourage my mom to endure it. I did. But I did it for her to live, not for her to die.
Writer and reporter of season 2 of the Dr. Death podcast, Heather Schraring, joins us now. Heather, how many patients did Dr. Fata do this to?
Well, the short answer is that's impossible to know. What I can say is there were about 550 patients who were noted in his case. And additionally, he had 1,700 active patients. He also had a patient pool of 16,000 patients. And what's interesting about that is when investigators tried to compare him to another single doctor who had the same patient pool, they couldn't. The only places he compared to were the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, and Cedars-Sinai. So what I can say is that it's possible that he could have done this to all of his patients.
Those are massive numbers of patients. Let's take a look at what chemo is and how it works in your body. This is valuable for this case especially, but you'll need this information in your life with some likelihood. The chemo drugs are put through your veins, right? They enter the bloodstream through an IV, and then let's zoom in here. The chemo goes through the blood vessels. They begin to seep out of the vessels into cells, including a cancer cell, right? A cancer tumor. There are lots of cells in here. Let's zoom in. The chemicals of the chemotherapy go through these little holes, and they knock out parts of the DNA. This blueprint, bang, they knock it out, and they prevent the cancer cells from reproducing. That causes the tumor to shrink or stops it from growing. But remember, in patients without cancerous tumors, the chemo can still be in there and attack other cells, healthy cells around it. That's the collateral damage that often happens. Now, the cells that reproduce quickly are the ones most likely to be hurt because their DNA has to be used a lot. So, for example, hair follicles, bone marrow, digestive tract, right? Those are classic places where you'll have symptoms if you're getting chemotherapy. Now, if it's killing a cancer to save your life, maybe it's worth it. But if there's no cancer, this can cause big problems. Chemo is a tough treatment, right? There's a term we use, cytotoxic, which means it's toxic to cells. It is tough on the body. Now, in a patient with or without cancer, chemotherapy has a bunch of side effects, right? The hair loss, nausea, vomiting, you've heard about that in movies. But people become immunocompromised as well, right? That puts them at high risk of infections and of illness. And you get heart and nerve damage because these cells have to rejuvenate themselves as well. And you can sense it when they're not recovering correctly. And then finally, of course, fertility, because fertility is all about reproducing in a big way. So, Heather, some people wonder why these patients didn't seek out a second opinion. What did you find?
Sure. So Farid Fata was considered to be one of the best doctors in the state. So there could have been patients who felt like they didn't need to get a second opinion. But there were also plenty of patients who did get a second opinion. And there was one victim who I spoke with who wasn't in the story, but she told me that her father was a Farid Fata patient, and he was also a doctor. And he did get a second opinion. And that doctor said, I wouldn't treat this. But that doctor didn't have the same credentials as Farid Fata. So how that made them feel was actually pretty hopeless, that, you know, you have the best doctor in the state saying, this is how I would treat this. I would do it rather aggressively. And so they decided to stick with him. Regardless, though, more importantly, whether or not people got second opinions or not, the victims aren't to blame here.
No, it's not about blaming the victims, but I do think we have to use any tool we can to escape people like Dr. Fata. I mean, how does he get away with this? You're talking about hundreds of patients who were part of the actual claims against him.
Sure. Again, Farid Fata, considered to be one of the best doctors in the state. So he, that wasn't fake. He had these really great credentials too. So he would use that to his advantage. He was a master manipulator. He gaslit people who questioned him. If he would say things like, I'm the doctor here, did you go to Sloan Kettering? And he really played on people's emotions, not only to get them to trust him, but also to belittle them if they did have questions.
Thank you, Heather, very much. Dr. Fata pleaded guilty to 13 counts of healthcare fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to pay or receive kickbacks, and 2 counts of money laundering. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison for his crimes. Up next, Dr. Fata told my next guest she had blood cancer and pressured her for 3 years, a long time, to start chemo. She says she lived like she was dying. We've been talking about the outrageous criminal healthcare fraud committed by Dr. Farid Fata. For more than 7 years, he was misdiagnosing patients, ordering unnecessary chemotherapy for hundreds who didn't need it, just to scam the insurance system and put money in his pockets. Dr. Fata tried to push chemotherapy on my next guest. For 3 years, he told Patty Hester that she needed treatment for a blood cancer called myelodysplastic syndrome. Patty joins us now, and I'm sorry you went through this, Patty. You didn't go to Dr. Fata's office blindly. You had recommendations, you did your research. So you go in to see Dr. Fata, almost immediately diagnoses you with myelodysplastic syndrome. That's a blood cancer, basically, or about to become blood cancer. What did he want to do?
Well, he said, yeah, this doesn't look good, and this looks to me like this possibly could be a form of pre-leukemia, And then, of course, he talked about myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS.
So he starts you on iron infusions, which is a therapy for people whose bone marrow is not working well. And you posted on social media about those treatments saying, I feel panic, I can't take a second dose, I have nausea. And then you ended with the post with a question. You said, why am I getting so sick from these treatments? I'm so sad. Share with us the effects those treatments had on you.
Well, I worked 12-hour shifts, and I was a fitness instructor, and I had energy when I went in. By the time I would leave, I'd started feeling bad. I became fatigued. I became very nauseated. There was a situation where I became hypotensive, where my blood pressure dropped during an infusion, and I was like, take it out. I got to go. I can't endure this. I'm getting sick. I need fluids. I need you to hang saline. And, I need water because I felt like I was fading away. So that was a real strange occurrence. And when I ran out of there, when I did get disconnected and I left, I went down the stairwell, the spiral stairwell, and got in my car and drove 5 minutes down the road where I teach fitness. Well, first I stepped in the bathroom there, threw up, got in my car, went down to where I teach fitness, walked, and I thought I was going to faint, and I became profusely ill again. But I just was so, like, I can't, there's something not right here.
So thankfully you didn't undergo chemo. There were others, however, who had serious side effects or even died from these treatments. So what do you want to say? What's in your heart to say to Dr. Fata?
You took my life and destroyed it, like dropped a bomb in my family. And I'm one who came out alive. And are you kidding? I went to Disney World. I spent all our money on anything that anybody wanted to do because you know what? I wanted people to remember me as alive. But you took that away from me. You held me hostage emotionally and my family and destroyed my husband. My son is no longer alive. I've lost my son since then. And these are horrific moments. I took, my niece, who she calls me grandma because my parents are deceased, and we went to Disney World. My family, we all went to Disney World. Any chance, I gave away my ski coat. I gave away my skis because Dead people don't need those things. You held my family hostage. And the thought, last July, we stood in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in federal court, and he wanted out. And it was still, this shows you the mindset of, I don't know, psychopath. It was all about him. It wasn't how it affected his family. It wasn't about not seeing his children. It wasn't about, I'm sorry. It was like, but what about me? What about me? I need to get out. I didn't understand the sentencing guidelines. I didn't understand this. It was all about him. So he's evil. It's evil. It's as evil as Hitler's regime. It's evil. And how dare you? You should never see the light of day. And I am a very compassionate person. It's been 10 years now. And of course I have a life. Of course, I never gave him all of my life, but he took all what he could take.
Well, listen, I want to thank you very much for sharing your painful story. And I'm going to share something with you. The reason we are so tough on medical students, and if they even cheat a little bit, we throw them out of school, is because it's one of the last chances we have to pull them back so they don't become Dr. Death. Because once they're turned out on society, it's very hard to rein in bad doctors. Thank you for coming forward.
Right.
To hear all of Patty's story and so much more, tune into season 2 of Dr. Death. It's a fantastic podcast. It's available now. We'll be right back. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on new videos to live the good life.